Did you know that in 2021, 25% of Canadians and 57% of Americans reported having more mental stress than last year? Stress affects focus, decision-making, follow-through, and ability to see the forest for the trees. Let's bring some calm and order into our lives, shall we? Productivity Toolkit 2022 to the rescue. Our toolkit can bring you a breath of fresh air for better focus, help you organize, and get systematic. You get 12 actionable templates to use immediately, and you're invited to quarterly workshops about how to apply each tool now. With the 2022 Productivity Toolkit, you get 24/7 access to all the templates and tips on how to use them. This year, I divided the toolkit into 4 key themes focused on systems: power of one, power of two, power of team, and the power of scale. I know you will love them. Here's what one customer had to say about last year's toolkit. I thoroughly enjoy your productivity tutorial sessions. They help me bring a lot of improvement to my daily routine. I use some of these tips and the templates with my staff, and we are all the better for it. Our 2022 toolkit, Get Systematic, will be released soon. Imagine the benefits that monthly guided reflection will provide you with our toolkit. Then watch those benefits power up as you integrate body, mind, and spirit through our practical, insightful quarterly workshops. If you purchase before December 15th, you get in our last year's price of $27.99 and receive the quarterly workshops free. After the 15th, that price goes up to $47.99, and the quarterly workshops are priced separately at $47 each. As you can see, the early bird gets all the rewards. So get in on the VIP advanced launch by heading over to shiftworkplace.co/productivity tools. That's shiftworkplace.co/productivity tools.
Hello, Culture and Leadership Connections listeners. I'm really happy to be able to present to you Sabra Saleh, who is a communications public affairs specialist. She's an enthusiastic global citizen with a passion for writing and telling an authentic story. Sabra had the privilege to gain local and international experience in North America, Africa, and the Middle East. With a career spanning over 15 years, she developed the skills to communicate at all levels of an organization with internal and external audiences in private, public, and nonprofit sectors. Very impressive. Sabra has provided effective communication strategies, advice, and support to all levels of management, to government, has been involved with employee engagement, change management, and media relations, and crisis management. So she really has covered all aspects of a communications role. Currently, as a public affairs specialist with Syncrude Canada, her focus is on internal communications and employee engagement. Like her diverse experience, Sabra has a Master of Arts degree in Mass Communications from the University of Leicester in the UK, a Bachelor of Science degree in Communications and Political Science from the University of Indianapolis in the US, and an Associate degree in Law from the University of Nicosia in Cyprus. Sabra's passion for communication extends beyond her full-time role, and she has served on boards such as the International Association of Business Communications Edmonton chapter in Canada, and the Global Entrepreneurship Network in Tanzania, and the Bougainvillea Community Foundation in Tanzania. So that's a really impressive bio, Sabra. Welcome to the Culture and Leadership Connections podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so glad that you could join me and that you can share some of your really exciting international experience and insights with the world.
I look forward to it. Thank you.
So let's start with you telling the audience a little bit about who you are and what you do that's not part of the bio.
I am from Tanzania originally, and I came to Canada in 2012. My family's background is from Yemen and Africa, Tanzania. So it's I'm basically an Afro-Arab. I left Tanzania when I was 6 years old, and I went to live in the United Arab Emirates with my mother in Abu Dhabi, and that's where I grew up. I completed my primary and secondary school in Abu Dhabi, and then I went on to university in Cyprus, the US, and then went back again to work in Abu Dhabi in public relations and communications. I came to Canada in 2012, and I've been working in different areas in communications since. My family background is ethnically Yemeni and African Tanzanian, so an Afro-Arab. Generations of Yemeni families moved to Tanzania back in the 1920s. So my roots are quite diverse from that angle.
That's great. You must speak quite a few different languages.
Yes, I think I've had the privilege of course, speaking Swahili, which is my mother tongue. And when I was in Abu Dhabi, I got to learn Arabic, and English has always been the language I've studied in school through university. So that's my strongest language. And I have a fluent understanding of Hindi as well. And that's only because an opportunity was offered in primary school that had Hindi as a foreign language. So it's pretty diverse.
Oh, that's exciting because each of those languages gives you a different perspective on the world.
Yes, definitely.
And a different way to express yourself too.
Yes. And I've always realized how language is so attached to the culture. And without the cultural experience, we can't really experience the full depth of the language.
That's for sure. So can you share a couple of incidents from your childhood that you think made you into the person you are today?
Oh, yes, absolutely. One of the incidents that I completely recall, and it has to do again with speaking different languages, was in fourth grade. I joined a new school, and at the time, Abu Dhabi had a diverse mix of foreign expats from India, Pakistan, other Middle Eastern countries. But some schools had majority of children from the Middle East. Other schools had majority of children from India or Pakistan. So the school I attended, the first had a majority of Indian and Pakistani students. And then I was moved in grade 4 to another school that had a majority of Arabs and Indians and Pakistanis. And what was happening naturally at break time is children would gather together in groups. The Arab students would gather together, the Indian students would gather together, and so did the Pakistani students. And I was very nervous in terms of, how am I going to make friends? And I don't belong to either of these groups. I may be partially Arab, but I identified as a Tanzanian. And visually, I do look like I'm a mix of an Arab and African. So what I did at that age was I approached the Arab students and spoke to them in Arabic. And I remember clearly how excited they were because they didn't expect me to speak Arabic. And instantly, I became part of their friends group. And, the following day, I kind of went to the Indian group and I kind of tried to, let them know that I understood what they were saying and I could understand the language and I was familiar with the Bollywood movies at the time. And instantly there was another connection. So for me, that was a realization that language is what's helping me make friends in the school, even though we were all told to only speak English because it was an English speaking school. But during the break time, that really gave me that sense of realization that, this is how I can be a part of any group by connecting to certain people with language, because they feel like I'm somehow one of them now and I can understand their jokes and I can understand the language. And I've used that ever since.
Language as a doorway. And for anyone who only speaks one language, they don't have those doorways. Those doorways are all locked. But you can open any of those doors, which is just wonderful.
Yes.
It certainly gives you an advantage for being a communications specialist, don't you think?
It does, because I also understand the culture of most of these individuals. When I communicate, I think, one of the projects, we had a diverse group of workers. And because I understood and could speak Arabic, I connected with some of the workers just to get an insight of what they thought about the work that we were doing as communicators. And are we getting to them in the way that they want? And surprisingly, they would open up to me about other things unrelated to what I ask, but it's just that comfort level.
Yeah, that always happens. I speak French and some German. And when I was in university, in my first degree, I worked at the registrar's office as a summer job. And there was a large influx of students from various French-speaking countries. And they were so frustrated. And as soon as I could come and say something in French, the relief on their faces, and they would just spill. They would tell me, I can't find an apartment. And, where do I find, this kind of food? And it was just, They were just so relieved. I remember thinking, I wish I could speak the language of every person that comes in here, because just to give them that moment of relief would be great.
Yes. And it is a moment of relief. When I first came to Canada, I volunteered at the Africa Center, and they're on the north side of the city. They cater to a lot of African and Middle Eastern families, technically any families in the area that would need any kind of support. And because I could speak Arabic, some of the Middle Eastern mothers and ladies that came to the center would just get drawn to me and ask me questions that might not even be relevant to the center. They might ask, I want to put my child in activities, like where can I take him? And it's something as simple as, oh, did you know the city of Edmonton has a whole book of resources that you can look into? So for them, it's almost like, she understands me. I can go to her for things other than what she's doing here at the center. So it feels good.
Yeah, you became a cultural translator too.
Yes.
Yeah, to help them get into the Edmonton, Canadian, Albertan culture. Yeah, that's really great. So that's a really good story that you told. What about when you got older? Is there something that you feel was foundational in just making you who you are now as you were maybe a teenager or young adult?
I think for some of us who are coming from multiracial backgrounds and are living in different countries from a very young age, one of the things we need to really build is our self-confidence and self-pride, and to just really break through any environment that we're in without feeling that we're a minority or we are different or we don't fit in. And my mother had been really instrumental with me on that front because she is a visibly Middle Eastern looking woman. Her hair texture is different.
Mm-hmm.
She's got longer, wavy, curly hair. I've got more, shorter, very curly, coarse hair. So that was very visible. And growing up in the Middle East, again, there weren't that many African families at the time, or families that you could relate to in a majority, right? So everybody was coming from somewhere different. But again, one of the schools I was in that had a predominantly Indian student base, they would have these annual shows and performances where they would ask all the kids, to dress a certain way and to have your hair done a certain way. So, of course, I didn't have hair like the rest of the Indian students did. And so it was very challenging to abide by those instructions.
Hair rules.
Yes.
Hair rules.
and I remember going home and telling my mom, well, they want our hair down and wear a hairband. And I'm thinking, my hair doesn't go down. Like if I open my hair, it's an afro. So she said, then you work with your afro. And I remember being so depressed that now I have to go to school with this afro that doesn't look anything like we were told. And I kind of, didn't want to go. And she said, listen, this is who you are. And this is your hair. You are wearing a hairband. There is nothing that you need to do to your hair. This is who you are. You have amazing ethnic mixes in your veins. You have to be confident and you have to carry your hair with pride. And because, of course, as a 10, 11-year-old girl, I'm thinking, why don't I have hair like yours? But she did not waver in her stance about it. And that has always put my head up high. So I never felt different from that point on. I would, go and present myself in any situation, no matter how I look. I've managed to have a great sense of self-esteem, self-confidence, self-pride. And considering the environments I was raised in, it's quite something. Now that I look back at it, it was quite a change in, a little girl's confidence levels that I carry to today. So for me, that applies to if I go to events, if I go to work, if I go anywhere, I go just the way that I am. I don't accommodate. I don't change myself to accommodate the expectations of where I'm going.
That's a beautiful story. And your mother really built that confidence by reinforcing that who you were and how you looked was perfect. You didn't need to make any changes to submit to somebody else's visual rules.
And expectations.
Yeah, that's really great. Everybody who has a Black hair story has some kind of an empowerment story around it. It's I don't know how come Black hair became so political and so linked to power, but it is.
Yes. And even like professionalism, I see articles still today of people being told, oh, your hair is not professional.
Yeah. What makes one type of hair more professional than another? I mean, duh. Those are great. Yeah. So that gives me a pretty lovely backdrop about groups, incidents from your childhood. You were born into different groups, and then you grew up in a culture that was different from those groups that you were born into. What aspect of those cultures would you say have most influenced you right now, your sense of who you are?
I think for me, embracing diversity and ethnicity and the mixes of diverse people and different ethnic groups, that for me comes naturally. Like I embrace it as part of we are all different. We are all mixed. I recognize the strength that individuals who are diverse have to offer. I recognize the diverse backgrounds that makes people open, and just to be able to recognize that we all have something to be proud of and we all have something to offer.
Right. But what about specific group influences? I mean, you've got Arabic influences, you have Hindi influences, you have the influence of Tanzania, of the Arab Emirates. What are some of the influences that you think you've adopted?
One of them, mainly from both cultures, would probably be the sense of hospitality.
Yeah.
And for me, that one stands out quite a bit because it's an element that's within our culture, and just the essence of making people feel welcome and comfortable around me, making sure that whoever I interact with have what they need. I feel free to ask for anything that they're looking for. They're feeling heard. That's not only in my personal life. I think even when I work in the professional setting, that essence of hospitality comes in different forms. When I have to welcome a new colleague or when I'm welcoming new members of the team, I always will go above and beyond. A lot of people would look at it as in, oh, why do you have to do all this? But it's something that is so embedded within me and the culture that I feel like something is wrong if I don't go above and beyond.
Because it doesn't feel respectful.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And that's one of the essence of things that I think in the regions, you'll have the Middle Eastern airlines, the customer service and hospitality with those airlines seem extravagant, but the extravagance is really because they're basing those hospitality qualities back into the culture, as in, our customers are our guests. So how can we make them feel as comfortable as they would be if they were our guests in our home?
Hospitality is really this deep respect of the other person as a guest. The respecting people that you live with or that are friends is a different sort of respect than respecting the guest. It's all respect, but there's a certain feeling about hospitality. For people that just grew up in Canada, I don't think they've ever experienced hospitality.
It's very different, and you see it. If you've lived in some of these countries and then you come to North America, you definitely see the difference.
Oh, yeah. People stand up when you walk into the room. They'll shake your hand. They ask you how you are, how your family is. They're attentive to every little detail of your comfort, to the emotions on your face. Are you okay? Is there something I can do to be of support? Here, you don't get any of that. They walk past you while they're walking, go, hi, how are you? Bye. Like, it's just not the same degree of care.
Yes. And I have very close friends who live in Fort McMurray. And one year they came down to Edmonton and they were going to spend a couple of nights with us. And so they were going to arrive very late at night and I wasn't going to be awake to actually welcome them to the house. And so I said, I'll have everything ready for you in the basement and please feel free and feel at home when you arrive. So what I did was, because I knew one of their children and the father had a cold, I had put some ginger in hot water in a thermos and some honey and whatever cold herbal remedies I could think of on a tray in the kitchenette in the basement. And I'd labeled the thermos with what was in it. And the next morning, it was like a joke in my house that they'd feel like they walked into a hotel and, with everything being labeled. And I laughed along with them. But for me, it was like, well, I don't know how else.
That's just showing respect to your guests and paying attention to their needs.
Yes.
Hey, I get it.
Yes, exactly.
That was
exactly.
a great example that you said. So the sense of hospitality has certainly influenced your sense of who you are, right?
Yes.
What about, the groups that you belong to may have also affected your leadership style? How would you say that your leadership style has been affected by all these different cultural influences?
From what I was born into or what I've just...
No, the ones you were born into.
It's almost like, how can I say it? So in our cultures, and that's again, the mix of the cultures I grew up with, you are almost taught a certain series of etiquette and work ethic and this is how you're supposed to do things. This is how you're supposed to greet people. This is how you're supposed to interact when you have a job and a work environment, taking things seriously to a certain degree. And I think with some of these aspects, again, of hospitality, growing up in diverse environments, when it comes to my leadership style, I think I am more leaning towards the community, like working more as a team, but more of a guide, not so much delegating things for people to do. And I think that sense of community and doing things together and expecting support from each other is what I think I've also expected when I've worked in teams or when I've led teams. As in, you could be reporting to me, but we're also a team together and we can lean on each other when we need to. So you're not really on your own. And almost like your success is our success, or we are here to help you grow. So it's almost like a community sense of style, more of a top-down kind of style.
Yeah, it's really attention to the community and leading with and through and together with the community.
Yeah, and I think that reflects a lot in many aspects of work that I've done, whether it's in different teams or projects, or whether it's a group of students. Just that sense to make sure that people that I work with or who, report to me don't feel like they're ever going to be by themselves in anything that they undertake, and that it's not just myself, but it's me and other people on their team that are always going to be there.
People are there for each other to create an environment of support so that as a team you can achieve those goals so much better.
Yes. And also communicating to a personal level, and it's like you said, when you travel to some countries, they'll ask you how you are, how your family is doing, how things are, but, to kind of be close to team members so that they're comfortable and that they can, come to you should they have something that's stressing them, and just recognizing the small things versus just being completely operational. Like, this is what we have to do, get the job done, what's next, and not really connecting with the employee or the team member as a person.
Right. Awesome. What about the groups that you chose to belong to? Because you came to the US, you also then came to Canada, and then you chose to belong to the group of communications professionals. There may have been other things too. I mean, there may have been a religious background that you adopted, or maybe you learned another language. It can also be your friends. What groups that you chose to belong to, what aspects of those cultures have you adopted into who you are?
I think one of the biggest influences that have made me who I am, my profession itself, communications, has helped me grow in so many ways and has taught me patience in ways that I could have never thought of. One, because it's a constantly evolving profession. No 2 days are alike. And early on, you realize that, today you could have a plan to do something, and then tomorrow a crisis breaks and everything else becomes secondary. So that for me has really made me flexible and not so stuck in my extremely organized ways. As a person, I like to be very organized. I like to have my checklist. I want to know what I'll be able to do when I have strong deadlines. The profession itself has really taught me to be organized, but at the same time, be flexible and patient enough to change course.
Yeah, to be responsive to the context.
Yes. And I do that. And because I recognize that, even when I have junior professionals or interns come very fresh into communications, I very comfortably tell them what to expect. And I also make sure to tell them that they have the support that they might need, because no 2 days are going to be the same. And so again, we also make mistakes. So the patience of, I didn't know everything when I started, and I did go through a few mistakes to be who I am today. So to also be patient with other people who are joining the profession and who might not be aware of what this might be or the repercussions of certain things.
Yeah, that sort of, in communications, you really have to develop tact, wisdom, timing. Yeah, nobody's born with that. You only find out when you make mistakes, really.
Yes, exactly. Like, what do you do when you hit reply all to an email, that goes out to the whole that was not supposed to go out to everybody?
Which brings me to my next question about what you were born with. You probably were not born wise, but you developed it over time. What would you say is part of your temperament that you feel you were born with, and could be because of your environment that it nurtured it, but it can also be, when children are born, they frequently have very strong characteristics that start to come out even as babies. So what would you say is your temperament?
That one is definitely patience. I've always been very patient with family, with work, with friends, patience and understanding. I think through my career, if I wasn't as patient as I was, I probably would have switched careers.
Mm-hmm.
And I do have colleagues, and people I've worked with in the past that have not been patient at all. They love the profession, but they're just more on the feisty side. And I actually, funny enough, find myself being sent to the line of fire because of my patience. And sometimes it's more like I don't really enjoy crisis communications, but because I'm so composed and I have all this patience, I'm normally the person that would be like, oh, you know what? She doesn't really panic, so maybe she should go.
Maybe, though, you're also diplomatic and tactful.
That is another one that you learn within the profession.
Okay, so those of you who've added those on, you'd say?
Yes. About 9 years ago, a colleague of mine from Ottawa actually said that to me. And that was the first time that someone actually said, oh, you're pretty diplomatic. And that was the first time that someone actually named it. And I thought, oh, okay. I thought I was just being courteous and polite. Is that what it is?
Well, is it?
Yes. Yes. And over the years, I've heard it many times. And I think maybe I should start owning it now.
Diplomacy, courtesy, and politeness all go together, along with hospitality. So it's a nice mix, really. You could be an ambassador for anywhere.
Thank you. Might be my future career change.
There you go. That's up and coming. So can you recall a time when you became aware that and you already mentioned so many of them because you had different language abilities, so you could often see how to bridge. But can you recall a time when you became aware that your cultural understandings were specific to your culture and not just the way everybody did things?
Yes. This one. When you come out of one culture and travel across the oceans to go to another continent, you definitely see that. One example that is clear as day for me is when I went to university in Cyprus as part of the international students group. We were all from, different parts of Asia, Africa, Middle East, and we did a lot of things together. And of course, these are all cultures that share a lot of similarities. So we would eat together. In some of the evenings, we would order food together. And sometimes you come back to the dorms and your friends are eating a meal and you'd be invited to join them, even if you haven't paid for the meal.
Mm-hmm.
So this for me wasn't something new. It was something, of course, I grew around and it continued in my time in Cyprus. And then when I moved to the US, I was at the dorm. This was probably my first or second week at the dorms in the US, and a young man ordered pizza. We were sitting in a common room watching TV. He ordered pizza. The pizza arrived. He opened his pizza and started eating. To me, it was awkward that first, he didn't ask anybody if we wanted pizza too when he made the order. So for me, that was different. The second thing was he didn't offer anyone a slice when he opened his box of pizza. So that was the second thing that was shocking to me. And then when he was done, he had about 4 pieces left and he asked if anyone wanted to buy a slice for $1.
Oh, oh, shoot me now.
So
I would call that narcissism.
And so for me, I was 19. I had already done 2 years at a university in a different country. It was very different to see that. And it was very different to see that other people around just looked at it as it was normal. It wasn't something that was shocking to anyone but me. I didn't, of course, say anything. I was fairly new. But that was one thing that really stood out, as in it was almost everyone to himself.
Yeah.
Versus
it's just the individualistic way of looking at things. And to me, I was born here, and to me, that illustration that you just gave is the height of rudeness. I can't imagine. And yet it is the norm. I mean, I see it around me all the time, but it never ceases to shock me.
And that's because, again, like your values and, might be different from, like, again, different families have different values, even regardless of where they live, right?
But yet I'm still influenced by it because I don't want to make myself seem like I'm so much better than anybody, because I don't think I am. And I remember being sitting at a table at one point, and I was serving people because I'd cooked the meal. They were there for dinner, and I was serving the meal to everybody. So I was filling up people's plates. And I don't know why I did this, but I served myself and put the plate down, which I would usually not do. I would serve everybody else. Like, it seems that's normal. When you're the host, that's normally what you do. Serve myself first. And I remembered seeing the shock on the faces of people around me. And I thought, why did I do that? That must be the influence of being in this individualistic culture.
It is different. My husband and I, the other day, were talking about another aspect of cultural differences, which for us is normal back home, but it's not here. And that is when you address an older person, so an older adult. We are used to not calling them by their first name. It's always going to be Mr. Smith, Mrs. Smith, Miss Smith in a work environment. And if it's family or family friends or relatives, it's always going to be auntie or uncle.
Mm-hmm.
So coming here and having to accept the fact that actually, no, my colleague Richard wants me to call him Richard. It's funny, I've lived in the States and I've lived in Canada now for like 9 years. I do it. I call everybody by their first name, but there's this little voice in the back of my head. And it's like my mother, telling me, how dare you call this older person by their first name.
Mm-hmm.
So I do it, but that consciousness is always killing me at the back of my head, saying that, I really wish I didn't have to call you by your first name.
Oh, yeah. And for me, it's the opposite to have to, because I work with lots of different cultures and groups. I'm sensitive to the point that you want to call an older person by Mr. or Mrs. or by their title, or if you know them well, auntie,
Mm-hmm.
uncle, and it's hard for me to do it each time, every single time, even though it's been, I'm saying 30 years now of practicing. Each time I do it, I have to make myself do it because it feels unnatural. And
Yes.
I think it's a so much better way to be. So I may value it and think it's a better way to be with people, but it doesn't mean you can automatically or easily do it because it's a cultural behavior you didn't grow up with.
Yes.
And even when people have the intention to do it, some cultural behavior is always great. They never feel completely right.
Yeah.
Others you can do, but some just feel really grating.
Yes.
Don't you find that?
Yes. It's hard, but you
do it. You adapt.
You do it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So is there something that you would like to tell people about the best way to work with you? What brings out the best in you? If somebody were to hire you, or you were working with, bringing people onto a team and telling them what would be a good way to work with you, what would you tell them?
I really think an employer or a client, I really think it's important to just have a casual conversation, to just get to know me, to talk about both our backgrounds, both our interests, what we do for fun, what our families are like. And it's not trying to just get private information, but to just understand where the person is coming from, because in this casual conversation, I feel doesn't happen with the exception of maybe a few colleagues that you might connect with. But if it's consciously planned, welcome to the team, let's have coffee, talk about you, me, what we do, and then have the same thing with the different people that I would be working with. Not everybody you work with you'll get along with, but at least you'll know more about them, have this conversation, connect. There might be some things in common that will pop up, and we would never know that if we don't really have these casual conversations from the beginning. And I remember when I was working in Senegal, the head office of the organization I worked for is in Ottawa, and we went for an annual meeting, and one of the activities that they had was to go skating on the Rideau Canal. And my colleague at that time was so excited. She was from Ottawa, and she said, "Oh, you guys, we're going to take you and you're going to go and learn skating on the Rideau Canal." But, they didn't know I could skate. I've been skating since I was 10 years old.
They never asked you. Can you?
They never asked. We never had that conversation, right? I was just an employee in the Senegal office. I was regional manager for communications for their Africa operations. But, when I said, I actually can skate, Abu Dhabi had skating rinks forever. So that's what I did every weekend. And it gave us a connection. And this colleague of mine is now one of my closest friends. She was, of course, blown away with the coincidence that I could skate. But, these conversations, I feel, really break stereotypes as well. You'd find out things about me that you would never think I would know. If you ask me what TV shows I saw growing up, maybe you'll be surprised we watched the same TV shows growing up.
That's so important. This idea of just having a conversation with people and finding out who they are from their perspective and asking questions first before you jump into an assumption.
Yes.
Have you ever gone skating before? Might have been a better question to start with, but it's just great insight that you could have even gone to the skating rink without saying anything and just say, "Oh yeah, that's going to be great for me to learn to skate." And then you do some great figure skating move, jump in the air, pirouette. Yeah, this is my first time on the ice. I'm just a quick study.
You see, that's when my diplomacy comes in and it reacts differently.
Okay, well, this is a really great image to have of you with your hairband and your afro doing a fabulous figure skating move, and then a wowed audience around you. So, I mean, not that you have an afro now, because I'm sure that you've found many new ways to do your hair.
Yes, I have dreadlocks now for 6 years, so it makes
awesome.
life a little bit easier.
Is there anything you'd like to promote or let people know about? Or any final last words that you'd like to say?
Yeah, I think as an immigrant coming to Canada, but as someone who's really lived in different places of the world and could very comfortably adapt to how things are here, it might not really be the same for everybody. You know, some people come to Canada and they haven't really been to other places. So this is all very new. And we're all, most of us are working professionals. I think it's really important, like, when you work with people coming from other countries, to just really be open in asking them questions about themselves and about their backgrounds. In a workplace, sometimes it helps to even ask, like right now, the big topic is diversity and inclusion, and how can you bring your whole self to work? Some people say it, but don't really practice it. But it's really good to ask your employees, like, what would we need to do as an organization so you can come as your whole self to work? And one example that I have, because not all of us are outspoken, right? Some of us are trying so hard to integrate that we start losing senses of our identities. And that's not the right way to go, because we really all should just be ourselves and be able to interact with each other. We're all doing good work. We're all working hard. We all have families or not. So I think a lot of immigrants coming into Canada, at least the ones that I've worked with, they're really so much caught up in integrating that they start losing a sense of their identity. They try to minimize their Africanness or Indianness, or try to be less Muslim or less this or less that. And it's uncomfortable. I mean, I'll give you one example. And for me, this one is dear to me because it means a lot, as I'm a Muslim woman. And when I walk into a new workplace, as soon as I'm hired, the first thing I do is I go to HR or whoever I know is in charge of facilities, and I ask them, so I'm a Muslim and I pray 5 times a day. It takes about less than 5 minutes. Is there a private room in this building that I can use for that? And I have really been blessed and so lucky that each and every company has accommodated my request.
That's great. And also shows your confidence, coming back to your story with your mother when you were younger. And she said, this is who you are. And you just stand tall and just step into your power, right? I mean, she didn't say it quite that way, but it's the same thing, You walk in and say, this is it. Is there a room that I can use? And that's so lovely, the way that you're asking for it. How could people say no? And we didn't talk about that because I didn't ask you about the influence of Islam. But, so maybe you want to say a little bit about that.
It's really a lifestyle. And, we all follow our religion to the best way that we can as individuals. I'm a Muslim woman. I practice my religion. I might not be a hijabi, but I don't wear a hijab, but I do so many other things. And it's hard sometimes when you're in places where there's a negative image about Muslims, especially when you're not used to being in an environment where now you have to advocate or feel like you have to defend your religion. Mm-hmm. This is all new, right, to most of us.
For Islam, there's the sense of being obedient to the will of God. There's the sense of following the example of the Prophet. Mm-hmm. There's the sense of doing things that will bring honor to your community, because they're the virtues that would have been expected of you. There's the discipline of daily prayer. There's the discipline of fasting. I mean, that must give you some ideas.
Yeah.
All of those things influence the way we are in the world.
Yes. And I think with me, the most prevalent one is service to others. Mm-hmm. Volunteering is extremely important to me. Service to others and charity. So at every opportunity that I get, if I can help, if I don't have the money, I will help by doing, by being somewhere or by going somewhere and helping in any way that I could. And if I have the money, then I will donate and contribute. And with my mother's influence, her teaching has always been, you help whoever you can, regardless of who they are, don't discriminate groups. So for me, it's all about just being a good human, really.
Well, being of service, being charitable, looking for opportunities to alleviate suffering. And then just in your whole approach of being hospitable and courteous, of being communal in the way that you approach things so that people feel comfortable and they feel they're heard. Well, if that comes, I think that's all part of the teachings of Islam.
Yes. And I think also we come from places where we don't identify and name things. So, it's like way of life.
Yeah.
But, you go outside and people have names for things. They call it out. They want to know. So it's very different. That's why sometimes you're like, oh, why don't you tell me about this? And I think, I don't, like some people don't like to talk about charitable things they do.
No, and you don't want to because it removes the sense of service. If you start bragging about it, it's no longer service. But naming and categorizing is such a European trait. So I get that from my heritage. Anyway, it's been lovely to speak with you, and I really have appreciated this opportunity. And what would you like to end with? Words of wisdom.
Oh my, I feel like I'm put on the spot. No, I think these conversations, Marie, are really, really great. Most of us are really happy and willing to talk to anyone about anything and just continue to educate the people around us, to contribute in any way that we can. And I think this is a great platform, and more people need to do that.
Thank you so much, Sabra.
Thank you.
Sabra Saleh learned early in life to use her ability to speak multiple languages for building bridges and making connections across difference. Moving smoothly from one ethnic group of friends to another by winning them over with her command of their language, Sabra learned that there were multiple inroads into relationships, and language opened the doors to all of them. As a resident of several countries, Sabra found herself well positioned to work as a communications professional, juggling messaging, marketing, news, and crisis with ease and calm. It was a gift to interview Sabra, and she even found the time to contribute a favorite childhood recipe to our Culture and Leadership Connections podcast recipe book before heading back home to Tanzania for a new phase in her life. If you want a copy of the recipe book, head over to the shiftworkplace.com website under the podcast tab and look for the recipe book download button. From the familiar to the exotic, you will love these dishes from around the world. Just another perk we offer as a thank you for listening. You can show your gratitude by sharing the podcast and rating it at lovethepodcast.com/culture and leadership. Thank you for listening, and may Culture and Leadership Connections continue to guide and inspire your day. This podcast would not be possible without the expertise of our Culture and Leadership Connections production team. A big thank you and shout out to Mike Kurlander for audio production and editing, to Malvika Kathpal for the show notes, Bernadette Guadiz for online web and social media management and promotions, Celine Bayogo for design, and Kirsten Hoyer for website and branding. Thank you so much. Are you a big Culture and Leadership Connections podcast fan? Our Patreon platform is the most versatile way to hear podcast episodes, cross-cutting theme discussions, and watch VIP podcast guest videos. You can download the app to your phone and listen wherever you are. Check out the subscription levels for perks that appeal to you. Feel good about helping us cover podcast production costs while enhancing your listening experience at the same time. Go to patreon.com/culture and leadership connections. That's spelled patreon.com/culture and leadership connections.